One. Good afternoon and welcome
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, I'll try again, and welcome to the June 23rd meeting of the Board of Library Trustees. That's June 23rd, 2022. And I'm getting some feedback, I think. So at my first opportunity, I'll try switching to different microphone. So we'll call this meeting to order and ask Francesca to describe how the public can participate in this meeting, since it's a hybrid meeting. Some people may be in the council chambers, but others can participate virtually. So Francesca, if you could describe how that works, I appreciate it.
Yes, Chair Thompson. If you are not joining us in person here in the council chamber, there are two ways to virtually participate in this meeting. You may join directly on Zoom Gov from your computer or mobile device, or you may call into the Zoom meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. To call in by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864, enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. If prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To make a public comment, you will click on the raise hand button in the Zoom toolbar. If you called in by phone, you will raise your hand by dialing *9 and unmute yourself when called upon by dialing *6. Attendees will be muted until it is your turn to speak. Today's meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. If you plan to make a public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone and ensure you join in time to accommodate the delay.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Less feedback, I hope. Okay,
Yes.
I'm trying my AirPods, so we'll see if that works better. Francesca, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Vice Chair Felguth.
Present.
Trustee Joshi.
Present.
Trustee Moreau.
Here.
Trustee Petty.
Here.
And Chair Thompson.
Here. Before we start the meeting, I just wanted to mention that we're starting this meeting a little early at 3:30 instead of our normal 4 o'clock, because we have a closed session scheduled for after this public session, and that closed session needs to start no later than 5:30. So I'm hoping we'll finish the public meeting well before that, but I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that we'll need to adjourn the public meeting somewhat before 5:30 if we're not already ready for that. So just a heads up on the timing of the meeting here today. So the first item on our agenda is the consent agenda. And for today's meeting, all we have is one item, the minutes of the May 26th meeting. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 1?
And Chair Thompson, there is no public comment.
Very good. Any discussion or a motion to approve the consent agenda with the, constituting item number 1, the minutes?
I move approval. A second.
So Vice Chair Felguth moved approval and seconded by Trustee Mora. Any discussion? If not, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Yes. Felguth.
Yes.
Joshi.
Yes.
Moreau.
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
And Thompson.
Yes, thank you very much. That's the end of the consent agenda. So now we'll move on to the public comment portion of our agenda, which is an opportunity for any member of the public to address any subject which is not on the agenda for today's meeting. So Francesca, could you see if there are any public comments today?
And Chair Thompson, there are no public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the public appearance section of our agenda, which includes items 2 through 6. We'll start with item number 2, which is to receive an update on the annual budget process and provide direction to staff. There was quite a lengthy budget discussion last night at the council, and turned out there was a technical problem with the agenda, and they weren't able to actually approve or take much concrete action on the budget proposal, and they continued it to next Wednesday. So that's one part of the update, but perhaps Inga could provide a further update.
Sure. So just as a reminder, when we had planned a 2-year budget, so 2 years ago, when we were envisioning where we would be now, we had thought conservatively, we would be asking for 1 full-time librarian and 1 regular part-time staff member going to full-time. And this is part of our gradual reinstating positions. So phasing back in adequate staffing for the library. Because the budget was, the economy was looking rosier, and the TOT is coming in strong, and so is the sales tax, TOT being the transient occupancy tax. We thought, okay, well, we'll ask for a little bit more. So we asked for a second librarian and a second position going from 3/4 to full-time. And these are positions that are being restored. They're not brand new, never been thought of before. But it turns out that even though the economy is looking rosier, there are some challenges, some significant challenges for the city still with budgeting. Lots of prices are going up. As we all notice when we go to the gas pump or when we go to the gas station, and that of course has an impact on the city. And also there are other big issues like infrastructure issues that need to be addressed and so forth. And then there's always the pension question. And we know in general that as we did big 5-year projections that we all had to tighten our belts. So as a result, we had a meeting, Chair Thompson, Vice Chair Felguth, and I with the city manager and assistant city manager. And I can't remember if the finance director was there or not, but anyway, we kind of came up with a compromise. And that is what we compromised on was what was proposed in the budget. That was heard on Tuesday night. And that is that we would have 1 librarian reinstated and 2 library assistant 2s reinstated from 30 hours a week to 40 hours a week. And in order to have that compromise, we said that we would kick in the delta between a 30-hour-a-week and a full-time position from the trust fund. So that was the proposal that was folded into all of the other budget requests that went before the city council, and there was discussion, but as Jim mentioned, Chair Thompson mentioned, no action was taken.
And Jim is fine.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So we will await next week when we expect the budget will be adopted. There was nothing in the remarks of council members or comments from the public at that time that indicated there would be a negative outcome for the library for what we've requested. So
Very good. Thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just said that's it for the budget update.
Okay, thank you very much for that nice overview, Inga. I appreciate it. Are there any trustee questions about the budget update? Marcia.
I just had a quick one. So when you go from 30 hours to 40 hours a week for the part-time to full-time and the trust fund pays for that, who pays for the benefits? Because I assume that goes from unbenefited to benefited.
Right. And so basically, when we look at the cost, we look at the whole cost. So it's the wage plus the benefit. And then for a regular part-time position, and then we look at the full cost for wage and benefit for full-time. And that total, the difference between those two totals is what the library said we would pay for the trust fund.
And is there any understanding that at some point the city will pick that up again, or is that a negotiation for next year?
So the understanding is this is a one-time to get that position moved into that full-time, restored to a full-time status. It's just a one-time that we're helping out because as we look forward, we think that the economy is getting stronger.
So just to clarify, so next year, the city will pick up the cost, or next year, the trust fund will pick up the cost? And for the first year, The trust fund will pick it up. How about the second year, third year, and fourth year? Who will pick up the cost?
City would pick it up.
The
And
city
it-
will pick it up then. Okay, so this is just a jump starting of those positions.
Right, it's
Yeah.
similar to the Bookmobile position was started out the year as simply an hourly position, and the Friends and Foundation kicked in the amount that would be needed to make it a benefited position.
Mhm.
So then it was folded in as a benefited 30-hour-a-week position into the budget, and then now we're asking to use trust funds to make it a 40-hour-a-week position.
But eventually the city will be paying. Got it. Thank you.
But, just as further clarification, every year when the budget is being reviewed and proposed, in a sense, every position is on the table. So, I mean, there's no guarantee, any position will be in the budget forevermore. So we just understand that, the understanding is that the city would pick it up in future years, but, that's, everything is subject to change. If we have another pandemic,
Right.
everything could, so
Right.
I just want to make sure that there's nothing really written in as a guaranteed contract. Anyway, Bob had a question. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. Just refresh my memory, Inga. When will the city council be meeting and able to take the vote that they couldn't do day before yesterday?
It'll be the 29th of June, Wednesday, the 29th at 4 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Inga or any comments or direction? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 2?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are dialed in by phone, dial *9. And Chair Thompson, there are no public comments at this time.
Okay, any further discussion on this item? If not, let's move on to item number 3, which is to receive and adopt a revised Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Plan. I believe Francesca Garibaldi is going to provide an overview of that, but did you want to introduce the item, Inga?
I'll just say that this has been on our strategic initiatives. It was proposed back in December of 2020 that staff had actually brought this forward as a suggestion to the board, and staff had proposed that we bring you a draft plan, and it's something that staff have been working on diligently, and in particular, Francesca Garibaldi has sort of spearheaded it, championed it amongst our staff. So we're very pleased with the way it's looking at this point, and I'll turn it over to Francesca, and she can say how it is different from the last version of the plan that you saw.
Thank you, Inga. Oh.
No, go ahead, Francesca, please.
Right, just very briefly, we returned to staff for feedback and received really meaningful feedback. And part of that was to reduce the number of work items and focus areas, which was done. And then also there were questions about the language of anti-racism. And so we wanted to clarify the use of that term as well. And additionally, we wanted to highlight that the city of Monterey is also beginning this work and has hired an intern in the city manager's office. The city manager, the assistant city manager, and then their intern, Brandon Kennedy, also reviewed the plan and provided feedback. We really do welcome all and any changes, and also if there is any desire to wait to approve this, then that is perfectly acceptable and welcome too. So we'll welcome your questions and thoughts about this plan and go from there.
Very good. Thank you, Francesca. Before we ask for public input, are there any questions from the trustees about the revised plan? Marcia.
Is this questions and suggestions or any?
Yes.
Anything or only questions?
Well, it may be better to do suggestions after the public input.
Fine. That is fine. No, I just I think it's much improved. I think it looks very good. I don't have any questions.
Okay. Any other trustee questions? I see Bob has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Since we can discuss a motion that would be made, yeah, with the chair's permission, I would like to, well, you said you wanted comments after we give the public a chance, right?
That's the way we normally do it. Yes.
Okay, well then I'll keep my hand in my lap until after the public have had a chance.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Bob. Anyone else have a question before public input? And again, after public input, we can certainly have discussion and comments, no question. If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on this item number 3?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. If you are connected by phone, please dial *9. And Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. Then moving on to discussion and comments, I think, shall we go with first Marcia and then Bob, since that was the order in which they started off the discussion?
Yeah, I just wonder if there's any appetite for, I could see one doesn't want to add to the current activities since staff is so limited and there's so much to do. But under future activities, I wonder if there's a sense to add the item, review the issue of library fines through the lens of JEDIB as an item for future discussion. I'd like to see that on there. And maybe it's, Francesca, maybe you had it subsumed under the third from the bottom bullet that said review other services, through an equity lens, but I think it would merit its own bullet.
Well, we had it under the umbrella of review library policies and procedures through a JEDIB lens, but it didn't specifically call out that. In the agenda report, it notes to review the library policies and procedures through a lens as a future activity.
Right.
But we can definitely highlight including the policy 130 fines for overdue library materials.
Yeah, I think it's a current issue and among so many libraries, and considering the fact that every library in the county except us has eliminated library fines, I think it's worth taking a look and at least doing a study of that through that lens. So,
yeah, I think maybe we could just spend a second on that item. I would support modifying the plan to more explicitly make that reference that Marcia was suggesting. Does anybody have a concern about that? Harish?
Yeah, I think that should go under board policy 120. That's where we talk about card regulations and fee. So it belongs there, not as part of JDIB. It should be under the general umbrella of the card regulations and fees.
I think the suggestion. Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, if I could respond to that, I think this was just to look at it through the lens of justice and equity rather than look at the whole policy, but just look at the implications of social justice on library funds, which would then inform the whole policy. So you're right, Harish, it goes there, but this is just another lens of looking at things, and that's a piece to look at this. That's all.
Okay.
Rather than just do a monetary analysis for the policy, let's look at the social justice issues involved, and that's all.
Yes. Okay.
Can we, by consensus, agree that that's a good modification to the policy? Anybody have a concern about that? We can kind of include that in the motion later, but I think we have some more discussion, and I know Bob is ready to have his discussion. So go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. First off, with regard to that last point, I would, looking at bullet point number 1 under future activities where it says review library policies, I would simply add such as library fees right there in the middle of that first bullet point sentence instead of making a whole separate one. And then it would be here, and as Harish, I think, very appropriately said, it's already in board policy 120. So in my mind, that would be a sufficient way of having it in both places. I just wanted to comment that I think this document is not just well done, but it's just right in terms of its comprehensiveness and also detail. There's a lot of structure to it without getting too specific. It's like a tree without all the leaves, maybe. The branches are there. And I think it is just right in terms of those factors in its current form to have before a new library director in a month and a half or two. And that by approving this or adopting this, I think we will be presenting the new library director with something that he or she can work with, right off the bat, but without feeling dictated to by lots of little specifics. So in that light, I would like to move that we adopt the plan as presented here with that one addition to bullet point, the first bullet point regarding using library fees as an example of library policies to be reviewed.
Is there a second?
I second it. If I can wordsmith a little bit what Bob said about adding that thing to the bullet. So if we could say to the first bullet, review library policies and procedures, including the issue of library, and I think it's fines, not fees. I don't know if it's all, you're gonna have fees for, I don't know, printing or whatever it is, but I was specifically thinking of fines for overdue books. So if we could just say including rather than such as.
Or we can put including policy 130, fines for overdue library materials.
Sure, yeah. As long as it says including that rather than such as that.
Yeah.
Is it 130 or
Bob?
120?
What?
Is it policy number 130 or 120?
130.
Oh, okay. We don't have copies of that. You sent us 120. That's what I was grabbing at and saw the word fees. But what Marcia said is fine with me. If she's offering that, for example, as a friendly amendment, it's totally fine with the motion maker.
Very good.
Then I second it.
Okay, very good. Under discussion, further comments from trustees? If not, I would just like to echo Bob's comments that I thought that was a very good plan, and I think it is still comprehensive, but it is a little bit more limited than the other one, which might have been a little possibly too aggressive in terms of the limited staff resources that we have. So I appreciate, moving forward, I think in a significant way on this important issue, but doing it in a way that hopefully is a little bit more workable for the staff that we have. So I would definitely like to commend Inga and especially Francesca for all the work that I know she has put in on this, and I know other staff were involved as well. And so I just really appreciate all the work that Francesca and all the library staff have put into this. I think it's a very good step in the right direction. So any further board discussion? If not, Francesca, would you do the honor of taking a roll call on this item that you've devoted so much time and attention to?
Thank you. Falgout,
Yes.
Joshi,
Yes.
Moreau,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes.
and Thompson.
Yes. Thank you again. Any other comments on this item, or Inga, anything you would like to add? Okay, very good. Then moving on to item number 4, which is a first reading of proposed revisions to Library Board Policy 300, Library Personnel Rules and Regulations. We mentioned before that that at the City Council meeting on Tuesday, there was a technical problem with their agenda. They had actually approved the omnibus ordinance that's described here earlier in the meeting. And there was no public comment or city council member comment on that ordinance. But later they decided that they will have to re-vote on that next Wednesday. So they've kind of approved that omnibus ordinance, but not completely. But nonetheless, I think it's timely for us to go ahead and have a first reading on the committee's proposal, which is basically to rescind the existing library personnel rules for the reasons that are stated in the staff report, and to replace it with basically a one sentence change that's shown on packet page 19, that the library personnel rules and regulations shall be as provided in chapter 25 of the city's municipal code, which was amended by the city council in July 22 to reflect the unique role of the library director and the board of library trustees in administering the personnel rules and regulations in accordance with article 7.1 of the city charter. So any trustee questions about this item? Or Marcia, as my fellow policy review committee member, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I just want to add that we all agreed, we looked at different approaches, and we agreed that this was the best way to make sure that the library personnel rules line up with both what reality is between the library staff and the library board and the city as well, rather than have our own independent rules. That this seemed to make sense to all of us.
Right. The beauty of it is that we won't fall behind
Mhm.
because our personnel rules are linked to the city's personnel rules.
That's right. Every time they make a change, we'd have to make a change. So this keeps us current all the time. And
Yeah, we actually hadn't updated them in 19 years, and they got horribly out of date. So we definitely need to change the way we deal with this. Any other questions?
I want to say we had tried. I do want to give Doug Holtzman credit for trying very hard to get it pushed through, but it's just one thing after another that delayed it. And then, of course, I tried as well, and Jim tried, and then Marcia and Jim tried. So yeah, this seems like the best solution. Then we don't have to wait for the green light from other parts of the city.
And the other thing I wanted to add is we thought it was really important when we have a new director and maybe new board members to have our house in order before that transition occurs.
Yeah, we've definitely been wanting to try to get this done before Inga leaves and before I leave. So Bob had a question.
Thank you. The one line that I highlighted in this document is packet page 18. Says primary changes you've been discussing with HR, city attorney, city manager's office. Is it correct to assume that the individuals administering all three of those offices are in accordance with what we just said and accepting these changes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, they are incorporated in the omnibus ordinance that was presented to the city council for approval. I looked at them very carefully,
Yeah,
and
good.
I'm totally satisfied with that. And
Good.
the
I just
city
wanted to
attorney,
make sure that all three of those offices were on the same page we are.
yeah, we spent a lot of time, frankly, kind of working
Sure.
through those issues with them and with
Sure.
each other. So yes, but at this point, everybody is in accord.
Great. That's what
And
I
I'm
hope.
very pleased. And I'm very pleased at that, because it took us 6 months of hard work to get there.
I would say that, the HR director that we were working with was Allison, and then Allison has moved on, and now we have Brett Neal. She didn't raise any concerns or objections, but she wasn't part of all that rigorous work. So, it's possible that there'll need to be some kind of education as we move forward, since she's new and we'll have a new director, just sort of going over how the policy works.
And I also think that the benefit of doing it kind of calls to everybody's attention the unique structure of the library, and the fact that employees don't report to the city manager and that their director doesn't report to the city manager, that the library has an exception and it does report to the board. And that is sort of emphasized here in a way that maybe it didn't come out as clearly before. So it's codified in their policies so they can see it as well. And so there won't be any question about whose authority is where.
Yeah. And
Okay, go ahead, Binga.
I do want to say thank you to both Chair Thompson and Trustee Moreau And especially Chair Thompson, I mean, all the work that you put in, all the careful reading that you did, all the suggested changes you made, it, we couldn't have done it without the two of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Inga. I appreciate that. So, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 4?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. And Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, very good. This is just a first reading, so no motion is needed. And I would just comment that I would expect that when we have the second reading at our July board meeting, hopefully the city council will have had both their first and their second reading and adopted the omnibus ordinance that incorporates the items that we talked about here on packet page 18. So any other comments on this item? If not, moving on to item number 8, I'm sorry, item number 6, to receive and discuss summary of stakeholder input on qualifications of the ideal library director candidate. And I'm hoping.
Jim, number
yes,
5?
yes.
What happened to number 5?
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped right over an extremely important item. And Pam, if you could wait just another couple of minutes, we need to review the council. Item number 5 is to review council policy on selection of officers and select chair and vice chair for 22-23. And so if you go to packet page
21.
Yeah, actually, packet page 22 is where it gives the chart. Packet page 21 does provide the policy. But on the packet page 22, I did want to highlight there's a minor typo there. It shows that I'm the vice chair and that Jen is a board member. And actually, that should be that I'm currently the chair and Jennifer is currently the vice chair. That's a minor typo. But the important thing is kind of under the city council's rotation policy. In looking at this, it's pretty clear that Jen, as the current vice chair, would be the first in line to be the chair. And so I would like to ask Jennifer if she's willing to become the chair starting on July 1 for next fiscal year. Unless there's any question anybody has about the policy first, I guess I should ask that first. Okay, if not, Jennifer, are you willing to serve as chair next year?
I am, if you can help me put my first agenda together. Either you or Marcia, if you'll hold my hand.
Well, I'll work with you. I'll still be here. And
Oh, good. Okay.
And I'll be glad to help as well, or Marcia.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've been working on it already, so I'm probably the one that could help. Okay, very good. Thank you, Jennifer. Then the next one is the vice chair. And again, looking at the policy, Harish is would be the first one to have the opportunity to be the vice chair for next fiscal year. So Harish, are you willing to be the vice chair next year?
I'd be honored.
Excellent. Well, before we have a motion to approve our new chair and vice chair, is there any board questions or comments or discussion? I guess we should get public input first too. But before that, are there any board comments or questions? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 5?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
And Bob, recognize Bob, he has his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to point out, in case anybody reads the fine print in the policy here again, and I discussed this at some length with the mayor over a year ago. On the one hand, it says that if the person's still on the board who was vice chair, they are expected to become chair. And yet right before that, it says the position of chair rotates to the person who has the longest current period of service without having been chair. And of course, that would be Harish. But so you see those two statements contradict each other. And then if you go with, well, she or he who was vice chair, if that person says, okay, to be chair, then when they talk about who gets to be vice chair, it would be, again, the remaining group, the person that has the longest continuous period without having been either officer. And actually, that would be I, because I haven't been chair since July of 2020. And let me see here. Oh, and Jennifer didn't start until October.
Right.
And I clarified with the mayor that the idea is to rotate it, not so much, because sometimes if somebody is on the committee or commission or board long enough, they have a longer period of service than somebody who's been on there a shorter time but hasn't had a chance to be an officer. And so I just wanted to bring that up in case, not because I want to be chair or vice chair, but just so that if anybody reads the fine print and says, oh, wait a minute, we're off by 6 months or something. The intent, even though there are contradictory statements there, is that it rotates amongst those who have never had the, as Harish said, the pleasure of being one of the officers. So just a point of information.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Bob. I recall that from last year as well, because there is, I think, a little bit of ambiguity in the policy as you suggest, and my understanding of it is the same as yours. So thank you.
Yeah.
Any other trustee discussion or a motion to approve Jennifer as our chair and Harish as our vice chair? Marcia.
With great pleasure, I make the motion for this wonderful slate.
And it was greater pleasure, I will second it.
Very good. Motion by Marcia, seconded by Bob. And any further discussion? If not, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Yes, Felguth,
Yes.
Joshi,
Yes.
Moreau,
Yes.
Hetty,
Yes.
and Thompson.
Yes, motion approved unanimously, and I want to thank both Jennifer and Harish for taking on this honor. I think is the word Harish had used, and I agree. And normally the next meeting after the selection of officers, the new officers would be in charge of the meeting. In this case, we actually have a closed session on June 30, probably. So my understanding is that I would still be the chair for that meeting, and this would take effect on July 1. So if everybody's comfortable with that, that's my understanding. Okay, good. Well, thank you again, Jennifer and Harish. Look forward to working with you. Next item now is number 6, which I tried to get to prematurely. So now we are there, which is to receive and discuss summary of stakeholder input on qualifications of the ideal library director candidate. And I'm pleased to have Pam Derby, our executive recruiter with CPS HR Consulting, available. She and her staff worked quite hard on getting stakeholder input and preparing this report that was not part of the original packet, but was emailed to the trustees and is a public document if anyone else would like to see it. So with that introduction, Pam, could you give us an overview of this report?
Certainly. Thank you so much, Chair. So I know that the board has received this. As you know, we spent about a week to 10 days speaking with a large group of stakeholders. We spoke with each board member individually and had conversations with all of you, discussing what you were looking for in the next library director. We also reached out to major stakeholders that included the library and museums department, those trustees. We talked to the museum commissioners, Friends and Foundation Board. There were major donors we reached out to, city leadership. I spoke with both the city manager and assistant city manager. There were community leaders and staff. We did speak with some of the leadership team, with staff personally, and then we did offer opportunities via an electronic survey. And I do know that electronic survey link was sent out to quite a list of individuals of contacts from the library as well. The online survey, we had 39 individuals participate, but we spoke with personally about 23 stakeholders as indicated in the report. So we had conversations across the board. And really, while the report is not very long, part of that is because really the major themes that bubbled up were very similar across the board. It came through loud and clear that everyone feels that this individual needs to be able to collaborate, that there are many stakeholders, and that the library director is seen as someone that's kind of the glue that holds some of these together and needs to be able to bring together, now the foundation and friends, is one group. But then you have the museum piece, which is a little different. And there was a lot of feedback, and we'll talk about that in just a couple of bullets, but there was a lot of feedback about the museums in the online survey. And that this individual has to be a really strong advocate for the department. And they've got to collaborate with private entities and with the city management. And so, and other members of the community. So there's a lot of collaboration that goes into being successful in this role. Obviously, public sector knowledge. They wanted someone who not only understood being a librarian, but that they understand city operations, because while this individual does report to the Board of Library Trustees, they're also a department head. And so there's that dotted line to the city manager and having to be a part of that leadership team. Obviously, knowing how to develop a budget and advocate again for the budgets library, while you're having to navigate, when you're a department head, oftentimes department heads are shuffling around and trying to get the most for their department that they can. So understanding how to navigate that city structure is important. Thrown in here was experience with capital campaigns. Obviously, fundraising is a big piece of this. It's one of the things we also addressed with candidates. We'll talk about that in our closed session, but one of the things that the recruitment committee talked to candidates about was fundraising campaigns and how they would approach that, because you do have a Friends and Foundation. I think staff development and leadership management came up quite a bit. It was mentioned quite a bit in the online survey. There were about 30%, I want to say, of the individuals respondents were 39%, I want to say, were staff members. And obviously it's been a tough time the last couple of years, and we're doing other library recruitments. It's been a very tough time during the pandemic for library staffs. Obviously, there had to be some layoffs. Morale has been hit. And so really someone who can help bring the staff morale back up, engage them, be concerned about their development and how they have the opportunity to move up and encourage their growth was addressed as well. As I mentioned, museums came up quite a bit in the online survey. Again, part of this is because of the pandemic. There's certainly a feeling that the museums having to be closed, and that was really detrimental. Obviously, it has been to libraries, to the museums, but that the museums may have suffered even more. And so hopefully someone who has at least some knowledge about museums, and cultural programs. People talked about the historic nature of Monterey and of the library, that those things were adhered to and that people had an interest in that. So that came through as well, that hopefully someone has at least an understanding or wants to learn about the museum piece. Certainly leadership was a huge piece of this. Just someone who's able to come in and has a vision, is a presence for everyone, is able to be there and be education for the board, to help you have to lead and be a board leader to help the board, as well as being an intermediary between the library and staff, maybe city leadership, push forward the technical advances, as it says, of the library, while staying true to the historical needs of Monterey. And so leadership is certainly, we asked a lot of leadership questions in our screening interviews of the candidates, and then also in the interviews that the recruitment committee did last week. Again, fundraising, it was another thing that is very important. You do have friends in foundation, but how are they going to fit into that? And are they comfortable asking for money, speaking on critical issues? And, you know, being an advocate came up several times. And that is not only about, you know, being able to gain funds through the city leadership, but also through, you know, applying for grants, negotiating major gifts, and understanding how tourism is important to the city, work to ensure that the library is part of that draw through the museums and the cultural arts programs. So again, historical knowledge came up, as we mentioned previously, that someone did understand, you know, this is one of the oldest libraries. This is the first library in California. And that also then plays again into the museum and cultural arts division of the library department. So someone who embraces that, they may not know that, have that historical knowledge coming in, but that they're able to embrace that. Many of the other things that we heard talking about personal characteristics are the things we hear with almost any position, but someone who's energetic, you know, they're open-minded, innovative, open to new ideas. And as a department head, of course, you do have to have some political acumen, as we discussed, good communication skills, that they're really community oriented, and that they're good at conflict resolution, transparency, they value DE&I, they're persuasive. You know, those were all things that we heard from several of the individuals that we spoke with, and that it also came through in the survey. There was talk about future projects and some of the things they'd like to see people working on. Obviously, DE&I initiatives are something that everyone is concerned about. Someone who does want to be part of that executive management team of the city, not just managing the library. There are library consortiums with other local libraries. Obviously, you have a new library building or updating the current one. What are those, you know, fiscal plant things going to look like, physical plants going to look like? The online survey, we do have all of that information and because we have the 39 respondents, it is difficult to, it becomes a little bit longer report to share all of that information. So we had the word cloud that you all saw, but really the things that came up were being innovative, creative, you know, good budgeting skills, someone who is an active listener, believes in the community, believes in community and cultural programs, that they have strong leadership and management skills, they're empathetic and compassionate, that they believe in building relationships, that they have integrity, and that they believe in equity, they're an advocate, and that they're, you know, they're visible and they're accessible, innovative and visionary. So the themes really, I don't think that we heard anything that surprised us. Many of the same things that many organizations are struggling with right now in this unprecedented time that we're coming out of. And so, but it's always nice, people knew that they felt heard, and that you had the board, they appreciated the fact that the Board of Library Trustees gave them the opportunity to participate. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
You're muted.
Thank you very much, Pam. Thank you very much, Pam. Are there any trustee questions for Pam about the report or her presentation? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment or input on item number 6?
Chair Thompson, there are no public comments at this time.
Okay, then in terms of discussion, any trustees like to make any comments or discuss this report or Pam's presentation?
Yeah, I was curious. I guess I should ask Inga. Inga, did you see any surprises in this that you weren't expecting to see? You know, it kind of covered what it was kind of what we expected, I think.
Right. No, I don't think there were any surprises.
Okay.
Well, again, there's no action required on this item. It's just to receive this report, but this will be an important consideration. All the observations about the candidates' qualifications and characteristics as we go through the final steps of the interview process for our finalists for the library director position. And we're actually moving right along with that process and hope to we'll actually have a closed session later this afternoon to talk about some of the details of that and brief the trustees on the qualifications of the finalists. And then next week, we'll be having interviews with the finalists, I believe. And so this information, I think, will be very helpful in the process we'll be going through in the next week. So if no other comments, or Pam, any concluding comments you'd like to make on this?
No, I just appreciate everyone taking the time to participate and share their thoughts with us. And it was very helpful in putting together the recruitment brochure and also in helping us put together the screening questions that we ask candidates and the questions that we provided to the recruitment committee as a draft to help you form your questions as well.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Pam. That's very helpful. And I think if no other comments from the trustees on this, I think we're ready to move on to the next section of our agenda, which is informational reports and staff comments, which on this agenda includes items 7 through 11. So we'll start with number 7, which is to receive a draft planning calendar of 2022-23 Board of Library Trustees meetings and topics. So Inga, could you give a quick overview of this item?
Sure, very quick. So this is a draft, and this is just based on what kinds of things we've covered in past years and what are some of the things we know are coming up. I did have to send you out a corrected version, which I shared with Jessica, because there was a lot of sort of duplication when I put that together. I apologize for that. And then Francesca pointed out a couple of things that need to be modified as well. So under December, the last 2 items on the list under December 8th, unfortunately, because they were laid off, the anniversary dates have been pushed forward for both Sarah Nolan and Carl Solbaka. So you can take them off the December list, and they will be celebrating their anniversaries at a later date. Other than that, I know that we're kind of mindful of time, so I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Very good. Bob has a question.
Yeah, Inga, on the recognizing Sarah and Carl, is the reason for changing that from December of this year the fact that well, there was time when they weren't working, and does that mean they will not have 5 years under their belt by December?
Correct. So the city doesn't count the time that they were not working as
Sure. No, I understand that. So it has nothing to do with continuous or non-continuous. It's just whenever they get 60 months under their belt, 5 years, then they can receive this recognition. So
Correct.
Hypothetically, I don't know how long they were off the job, but let's say it was 2 months. Then we could be looking at this in February instead of December.
I think
it was just a 2-month period. Just to use the numbers.
I think it's 2026 when they'll be recognized. It's partly also if they were brought back, but they were not brought back in a benefited position, that's full-time or regular part-time, then that doesn't count towards the way the city calculates people's anniversaries. So in Carl's case, he came back pretty quickly, but he came back as an hourly worker. And so that doesn't count towards his anniversary. Unfortunately.
Is that I mean, that's an official city policy for recognizing anniversaries. If the board looks at somebody and they have a long time, we can recognize anybody for anything we want. And I'm just thinking that if somebody like Carl comes back at a lower level because he presumably wants to help out the library so much, I would feel really lousy if we didn't recognize that, because there were other people who didn't want to come back and they found other jobs, or they didn't want to wait And you know, he's an example of somebody who did come back. And I feel really, I would feel remiss if we didn't take note of that.
Right. Well, one of the things that Francesca had suggested with our JEDIB plan is equity and so forth is looking at ways of recognizing the hourly employees. So for instance, we're going to be recognizing library assistant Phoebe Pagano for 5 years service next month. She's actually been with the library for about 20 years, but the first 15 or so, she was an hourly employee. And so those hours aren't recognized as part of her anniversary. So that's something that we can look at down the road, is how to recognize those very dedicated people that put in lots and lots of hours, but they're not benefited. And so then they don't go towards their service recognition.
And through this, whichever staff member it happens to be who's running the volunteer program, I assume we have periodic recognitions of volunteers who have, you know, been helping us in that way, you know, indispensably. I mean, we couldn't do everything without all those volunteers. We've said that over and over again. And
Yes.
we need to be recognizing them, and they get zero pay.
Right. And we did do a volunteer recognition
Yeah.
in April, and in previous years, we've actually counted up, you know, who's served the longest and who's been there the shortest amount of time, and, you know, different kinds of statistics like that to just kind of call out the different volunteers, because of course we really, really depend on them and appreciate them.
Okay, thank you. Harish, did you have a question?
Yeah, just about what Bob said, the city calculates things differently because those things are based on, you know, when you can retire, when you get your benefits, things like that. So if you're working part-time, it's prorated. But you're right, for the library purposes, we can recognize anybody that we think has done long-term service, whether it was in an hourly position or part-time position or whatever.
Correct.
I agree with Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Well, maybe Jennifer and Harish, being the upcoming chair and vice chair, can work with Inga or the new director in taking another look at some of these issues. But I think in the interest of time, I'd kind of like to move on, if you don't mind. Any other questions on the draft calendar for next year? And I should just mention that this is you know, having been the chair this past year, and we had one of these about a year ago, it's a living, breathing document. You know, it changes from month to month. We make modifications to it. So this is just kind of a starting point and a reminder, both for the board, and I think hopefully it'll be very helpful for a new director too, of things that are coming up. But that's not to mean that they will necessarily happen the exact date that are shown here. That's just kind of a planning document. Marcia, it looks like you had a question.
Well, actually, I just wanted to echo that. I think this is going to be so helpful, both for the new officers to make their agendas every month, because you can start with this list, and for the new director. It's really part of the succession planning, I think, that Inga has been working on, because when somebody new comes up, they really want to know, you know, what are the things I have to cast my attention on this month? What are the things that are going to, they don't want any surprises, and this will really, really help to set up a new director for success. So I think it's great.
Very good. Well, at this point, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 7?
Yes, Chair Thompson, there are no public comments at this time.
Okay. Any further trustee comments or suggestions? If not, no action is needed on this. It's just to receive the calendar and realize that it's a flexible document that will change, and the new director, you know, may have some different thoughts too about you know, how to handle various things. So that's certainly part of the situation. Moving on then to item number 8, which is to receive a quarterly report on library activities. Is there anything in particular you'd like to highlight, Inga?
No, and what I was thinking is for the rest of the informational reports, that's items 8 through 11, maybe we could just entertain questions for the whole group rather than go through each individual one in the interest of time.
I think that's a good suggestion. Any trustees have any questions on items 8 through 11? And I'll just, for the record, I'll just indicate that item 8 is the quarterly report on library activities. Item 9 is the quarterly report on museums and cultural arts activities. Item 10 is the financial report, and number 11 is the statistical report. So any trustee questions on any of these items? If not, Jennifer, did I see your hand or not? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on items 8, 9, 10, or 11?
Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, then I don't believe any of them require action, so no motion is needed. Any further trustee discussion of any of these items? If not, then we can move on. And the last part of the informational reports and staff comments is to give Inga a chance if there's any verbal updates that she wanted to make. And I think in particular, there were a couple of items on the city council agenda last Wednesday that were kind of approved, but then unapproved because of the technical problem with the agenda. But maybe you could mention a little bit about the Bookmobile in particular, and anything else that you thought, any other updates that you would like to provide.
Sure. So one of the consent agenda items on the city council meeting for the 21st of June was an update to the master fee schedule. And because we've been going through our various policies, we have made a few minor changes here and there. For instance, we proposed to raise the monthly fee for a library card for somebody who lives outside of California from $5 a month to $10 a month. Well, those kinds of things are on the master fee schedule, so it's actually up to the council to approve those changes. So they did approve a new master fee schedule, but of course, now it's going to need to be reapproved because that was part of the consent agenda for that meeting. So that was a minor thing. They were just very small. But then the more significant item that was on the consent agenda was the Bookmobile. And just as a reminder that the library received a $144,000 grant from the state of California to spend on replacing our current Bookmobile. And then the idea is that the Bookmobile Reserve Fund, which was from the Aller Family Trust, would pitch in the additional amount needed to purchase a replacement vehicle, and then any monies left over not spent from that Aller Family Trust could then be used on Bookmobile services. And the board will have a discussion at some point about what those services might entail. And they could, for instance, potentially entail a small outreach vehicle, an electric vehicle like we've talked about. But of course, that's for a future discussion. So the great news was that that consent agenda item was approved. But of course, we need to have it reapproved at the meeting on Wednesday. So, but that was the good news. And I should mention that in identifying the amount that we would need from the Aller Trust Fund to pay for the Bookmobile, we had to factor in tax. And so vehicle tax on a purchase of $192,000, you can imagine is almost $20,000 just for the tax on the item. But even with that, we would be left with about $100,000 in that Aller Family Trust that could go towards Bookmobile services.
Very good. Thank you for those updates. Any questions on any of Inga's updates from the trustees? If not, then let's move on to trustee comments, starting with Trustee Petty.
The only thing I want to say is to continue what Inga was talking about, the Bookmobile. I'm really, really happy that it's finally, after it feels like forever, going to happen. And the Sprinter van, Inga, is smaller than the one we have now, right?
Right, so our current vehicle is 30 feet and it's
Yeah.
also an extra wide vehicle, and a Sprinter van would be 24 feet long.
And
And
which means that the staff person that drives it doesn't need to have all kinds of fancy driver's licenses and everything, right?
with the current vehicle, you don't need a fancy driver's license either, but it's such a large and wide vehicle.
Yeah.
You do need a lot of training and then a lot of
Yeah.
nerve and
But anyhow, this is the new one's 24, approximately. Great. I just want to comment that I think that's long overdue, and also the inclusion with the extra money we're going to have of a smaller electric mini bookmobile, maybe we call it, that we can take to, you know, farmers markets and fairs and things where a small vehicle could fit in, is just, you know, an outstanding thing we should have that on our planning calendar as well. Because I'm looking right now, it says Sprinter van in the spring. And I guess that gives us a range of several months when we might actually take possession of that. But I hope that we move forward in discussing and planning for the additional tiny vehicle as well, long before then.
okay.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Trustee Joshi.
Well, the year is coming to a close. And it's been a pleasure working with everybody, both on the board and with the staff that I've been in contact with. I'm looking forward to the next year.
Very good. Trustee Mora.
I particularly want to thank Jim for his incredible year of service. I think that with all of the reports and the updates and the policies, and in particular, what he's put in on this director search, you guys should only know. And his calendar, I think, and he did it all with good humor and intelligence, and he made it fun. So it was really a remarkable year, and I just want to express my appreciation and thank him, and thanks to him, we're really in good shape, I think, for the next year, for the next director, and the the new library director and the new chair. So he's, I think you've left the place a lot better than you found it, Jim. And thank you very much for all your time and effort that you put into this, which is above and beyond, I must say.
Thank you very much, Marcia. I appreciate that. Vice Chair Fogut.
Oh, I cannot begin to tell you how happy I was to see this draft planning calendar document, because I had been staying awake with nightmares. You leave behind some big shoes to fill, Jim. I think you were the right person at the right time at the helm, you and Marcia before. And, I just hope I can keep up the tradition, and looking forward to working with the board and with Harish and our new director.
Yeah.
And next month it's time to thank Inga.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Big time.
And so my comments are the last, and I just wanted to thank all my fellow trustees for working, I think, so well together this past year, and also particularly to Marcia, first for being a good role model for being chair. She said things are better than what I inherited, but I actually inherited a good shop too, because Marcia and Bob before her have done a very good job also. And I really appreciated the work of all the staff and the volunteers. Just our entire organization has been through a really difficult couple of years. And I just have so much appreciation for all the work of all the trustees, and particularly of the staff and the volunteers, to keep the library going pretty well. I mean, it's not quite at the level we'd like it to be, but I think it does a damn good job, frankly. And I think even during this pandemic, we've accomplished a lot, and I'm very proud of that. And just wanted to say that it will be my honor to pass the virtual gavel on to Jennifer on July 1. So that, unless there are any other additional trustee comments, I do want to, we'll be shortly adjourning to a closed session, but the last thing we want to do at this public session is to allow the public an opportunity to comment on either of the closed session items. And the first item on our closed session is to consider public employment, library director candidates, review of qualifications and applications. And the second closed session item is to consider public employment of an interim library director candidates, if we need an interim director, we don't know for sure yet, to review of qualifications for interim library director as well. So this is an opportunity for any member of the public who will not be able to participate in our closed session, but this is an opportunity for any member of the public to make a public comment before we go into closed session on either of those subjects. So Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on the closed session items?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial *9 if connected by phone. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. So in a moment, I will adjourn this meeting, and I would suggest that we take a 5-minute break. And then if everybody could log into the separate Zoom link that I sent, that Brett, our new HR director, sent you a couple days ago, and I resent it to you this afternoon. Does everybody think you have that link handy so that you're good for connecting to the closed session? Because it's a different link than this one, of course. Harish, did you have a question?
Yes. Do I need to close the old Zoom session, or do I just click on the close?
We'll leave this meeting and then wait 5 minutes and then log back into the closed session one.
Okay.
And also, I should have said,
thank you for sending the link again, so we didn't have to be scrambling around looking for it.
You're welcome.
Could I just ask if somebody will go to the closed session?
I will go there right away. I will go there right away.
Thank you. Yes.
And Inga, this is Pam. I think Brett was planning to. No, we're going to turn it over to you, Jim, right, as host?
Depends on whether you need it for screen sharing, Pam.
Well, so I'll have her turn it over to me first, and then I'll turn it over to you when I leave.
That sounds
okay.
That sounds good. Good.
So how many minutes do you want us to wait before we try to log on to it?
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Wait 5 minutes and then log on. Okay.
Yeah. Does that give everybody enough time for a little break?
It's fine.
Okay. I also, I think I need to announce that we'll be adjourning this public session to the closed session. And at the end of the closed session, that will be the end of our meetings today. We won't come back out into public session after the closed session. There will be, if there's anything to report out from the closed session, that would be done on the summary on the website as it's done for other closed sessions. So if there are no other questions or comments, we'll adjourn this meeting, and the trustees only and Pam will will join a new closed session in 5 minutes. So thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.